Broadcasting from an undisclosed location under a farm pond somewhere in the Midwest. Your host is Jim Crowley. This is Slickfish Radio. Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Slickfish Radio. Usually we do these about every other week. Man, you guys are chiming on already. Glad to see you here. If you're here, you know who's here with me. Two-time BASS Elite winner is my guest. That is Mr. Bill Lowen. Excited to have him back. As crazy as he was, I mean, think about this. St. John's River last week, wins that. Still in Florida, takes his camper with his whole family over to Okeechobee, fishing that one. I don't think the guy's got a whole bunch of sleep, but we're excited to talk to him. So happy for him and his family that he won his second one. Anybody who knows me knows how much I love fishing a jig, and and a swim jig, matter for that fact. And so cool to see him win yet another one. Just excited for him. That was just a fun one to watch. Already, Ted Koski is here. Hey, Ted, how you doing? Thanks for being here. Vance, Gordon, Bill, and Jim standing tall, looking good, ought to be in Hollywood. You're darn right, buddy. That's how we roll. Bill told me he's going to put on his bikini earlier. I think he shied away from that, but hey, we can dream, right? So anyway, glad you guys are all here. I want to thank our friends here at Lure Parts Online. As usual, we're going to show you some great discount codes at the end of the show for Lure Parts as well. Our friends over at Cast King, of course, a bunch of new products coming out from them, and we will be able to fill you in on that later. Our friends over at Wired to Fish Coffee, drinking some coffee right now, getting me some caffeine here. Also, our friends over at Mudhole. And for those of you at Mudhole, just so you know, for Mudhole right now, they're giving 10% off your first order, as well as free shipping over $99. So if you have that, we can, if you do that, then you can do that. You can get free shipping. Pretty cool. Our friends over at Dakota Lithium, and also our friends over at Shields. So we'll bring him back. We'll just bring him on in a second. Matter of fact, while he's here and we got him, let's bring him on. Bill, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, buddy. How are you?
Good. I thought we had a shortage there for a second.
Well, I'm trying to do this on my phone, and somebody just tried to call in, and I think we got a little glitch there.
Oh, okay. Well, if that happens, we'll know what to happen next time. Hey, man, first off, congratulations on your second win. What a thrilling thing to watch, man. That was so much fun. Obviously fun and nerve-wracking for you, but it was great to watch at home. And just let us know, man, how did that all break down? I mean, everything worked right into your wheelhouse.
Well, that's my first win on the river, on a river. I'm kind of known as a river rat, but I had no idea, honestly, Jim, that I was on that type of quality of fish. I had, I don't know, 6 or 8 bites in that area in practice, and the one I caught was a 3-pounder. So I knew there was fish in there. I didn't know how big they were. The first morning of the event, I roll in there, and my first 2 bites are a 5 and a 6. And at that point, I was catching them on my flipping jig, and I thought, I might have found something really special here. And obviously, as y'all watched all week, every day was different. There was a lot of big fish in there. Just one of them areas you dream about finding. And it was just a blessed week. I honestly still really hasn't sunk in yet. It's been crazy on the road, getting over here to Okeechobee, the next one. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been exciting. It's been stressful. But hey, look, I'll take it.
No kidding. And Adam Liberty, or at least just turned, he said, "Dollar Bill, dude is my hero." Well, there you go, man. And he's sure a good guy, and we're just thrilled for him. So, Adam, thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, just watching at it, and I love river fishing too. But you grew up on the Ohio River fishing it. I grew up fishing the Illinois River, and so bites were few and far between sometimes. And so when you could get back to river fishing and come up with that kind of quality, that had to be really exciting for you, especially when you pull into an area and you're looking for that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden the first bite is 5 or 6 pounds. Now let's break this, if you don't mind. Let's break this down a little bit. When you come into an area like that, you're in Florida, so this is pre-spawn. The water's going to be warmer than anywhere here in the Midwest. Is the jig the first thing you're going to, or you were starting to throw a swim jig or a spinner bait? How did the whole thing break down before you started getting those bites?
So, I guess obviously let's start off. When you think about Florida, you kind of traditionally don't think about the type of areas that I was fishing in. I went north of Placa on the river. And once you go north, you kind of lose a lot of the vegetation. You lose a lot of the lily pad fields and things like that. There is some areas that have that, but predominantly once you get up there, it's what I call hard cover. Laydowns, woods, pieces
Hmm.
of wood, floating pennywort mats, maybe a few isolated lily pad deals, but for the most part, it's hard cover. And for me, anytime I go to Florida, I'm always paying really close attention to the weather. And we had a big cold front that was coming in.
Hmm.
And anybody that fishes Florida knows that when cold fronts come into Florida, those Florida strain bass, they do not
They don't
like.
like it.
Um, so my game plan was to try to concentrate on creeks that had deeper water in them. Deep Creek that I was fishing in had some channel swings in it that were 25 to 35 foot deep. So it was
Wow.
a really, really deep creek. And then I had two other creeks that were kind of similar to that one, that I had some good bites in practice, and kind of thought I was saving them till the last day. Well, we all seen it, that didn't work out either. Um, but I guess when I go to Florida, a bait that I always have tied on is a swim jig. And the reason for that is the swim jig gives me the ability to cover a lot of water. It's a bait that gets big bites and little bites. So simply by having a swim jig on and covering water, it can kind of tell you a lot about what's going on, tell you what kind of mood the fish are in. There's never a time that I don't roll out of the dock that I don't have a swim jig tied on. But like I said, I chose those creeks and I figured that those fish would be less affected by those cold fronts than, let's say, fish that are, in some shallow backwater bays or something that are 2 or 3 foot deep. So that was kind of my game plan going into the week. I stayed on the lower end of the river first day of practice in some spring areas, where we knew the water was going to stay warm, and I just couldn't get um, anything going down there. And I've been going to Palaca now for, I guess this is my 20th year on the elites, and I believe we've been almost every year. And so I've actually spent a lot of time up north, and know a lot of those creeks pretty well in and out. Um, so once I figured out that I could get a bite in those deeper creeks, I knew exactly where to go and exactly what type of cover to look for. So by having some knowledge of that river, definitely helped me out last week.
Now, especially when you said, and I noticed, especially, I think it was the first day they talked about it a little bit, but the second day, they said exactly what you just said, is that you were picking deeper creeks. And I'm like, you know what? When you think about Florida, for those of us who don't fish it very often, you don't think about a whole lot of deep water like that. But I have fished it enough to know that exactly what you said. They get really sensitive to any kind of cold front like that. And in those shallow areas, you think those fish just bury up and stay there? Where the good thing about the deeper creeks you had, where they could drop off into that deeper water, when that sun came up, it seemed like your bite got better later. But was that due to the sun and the tidal influence, a little bit of both, or what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I think so. The thing to remember when you're on title is that the tide is the most important thing that you need to pay attention to. You need to
Okay.
pay attention to every bite you get and what time that or what level the tide is at. For me, the best tide was that 1 or 2 hours right before low tide, and then that 1 or 2 hours right after high tide started to come back in. So there's always a magical window right there. But that first 2 hours right before tide get bottomed out or got low, um, was the prime time, and that was kind of the problem on the last day. The tide gets an hour different every single
Every
day,
day.
and
Yep.
I was running out of time to catch that tide. About the time I was weighing in was about when the tide would have been right. Um, but I think like when I concentrated on those deep creeks and paying really close attention to the tide, I've always had a theory that when them cold fronts and things come in, if you can concentrate on structure that is what I call vertical, where a fish can go up and down in the
Hmm.
water column instead of in and out, I always feel like you're better off, especially when cold fronts are coming in. I mean, if you think about, let's just think about like a Table Rock Lake, for example. In the wintertime or when the water's cold, them fish like to stay around those bluffy type, channel swing type transition. It's no different than being in Florida. So I kind of tried to, like I said, formulate a game plan that um, I knew I would be trying to concentrate on fish that wouldn't be so affected by the cold front, and thank God it worked out as best as it could work out. 68, almost 69-degree water temperature, and they were very active at that water temperature. And what I figured out really quick was anywhere you had a drain coming out of the woods or out of the forest, them fish were set up right in front of that, and you could skip that swim jig up in there. And when you come swimming it out in practice, you could see them waking or bulging up behind it to come get it. So you could actually take it away from them instead of actually getting one
Ah.
shaking him off. Um, they were very aggressive, like I said, at that water temperature. Well, first morning of the tournament, when I roll in there, the water temperature is like 64, 65. And as the tournament progressed, that water actually got down into the, right at 60 degrees, 61, 60, 62. And then by midday, it would warm back up 64, 65. So the water temperature was very important. You heard me talk about saving two areas up the river that were deep creeks as well.
Mhm.
And I went to those right out of the gate the fourth day. And when I dropped the trolling motor, both of those creeks were 54-degree water temperature.
Ooh, yeah.
So I knew immediately that this is not going to work. So went back to my primary area, and that's where I finished the day out. But it was a combination of everything: water temperature, water depth, the tide, and it's a lot to try to put together and to make it all work.
Yeah, but having that river experience, like you do, that really led to something. Because you said something a little bit earlier on in this last conversation where you said, there are little drains coming in, and I always remember on the river growing up that whenever you've got current like that, even if you have a bad front or something like that, those current can always position fish, and if you have water coming in, that a lot of times that's going to be a high percentage spot. And like you said, they were waking going after that thing. So even Florida fish like that react to that incoming water like that. I mean, that I would assume, and just for people who might be wondering why would they do that, I would assume they're looking for incoming food. That's just current right there. That's a good place for those to set up. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And it was the perfect storm last week because what I noticed right off the bat, the one day of practice that I was in there was a lot of brim or bluegill
Hmm.
that swimming around really shallow. They'd actually nip the legs on my jig sometimes. Um, and like I said, it was that perfect storm because every one of these fish that I was catching were pre-spawn fish. So we all know that right before they go on to bed, they put on a big feed bag.
Hmm.
I never saw a fish on the bed up there in 4 days. And every single fish I caught was just big and thick and fat.
Yeah, they
So
were.
it was just like I said, it was just that perfect storm. Them fish were setting up in them drains, eating the brim and the bluegills. There was actually a couple times during the event where I would see them come running bluegills up against the bases of
Oh,
trees
that's
and stuff
cool.
like
Yeah.
that. And actually, that 4 pounder I caught that got tangled up in the tree,
Yeah.
I watched that fish run a bluegill and threw my jig right on top of her. As soon as it hit the water, she ate it. And then obviously she got caught in a tree. Thank God I got her out. But like I said, it was just that perfect storm, that pre-spawn. They were feeding up. I knew what they were feeding on, and every bluegill I saw was really dark and black. That's why I went with the black and
Blue
blue.
jig. Yep.
Uh, because even though the water is extremely clear than there where I was at,
Hmm.
um, it's a it's a black clear. That's what I always call it. It's black tannic water, but it's extremely clear. And that black and blue, blue crawl color skirt of mine in my signature series line, and that tannic water, they cannot resist it. My two favorite colors in that tannic water are that blue crawl and June bug.
I was going to tell you, I got one of them here. It's called Newgill. It's kind of hard to see, and I didn't know if that was the one you were throwing, or was it more of just a black and blue?
Yeah, it was the black and blue. It's actually called blue crawl.
Okay.
Uh, was the color. It actually doesn't have any tinsel in it. It's just black. It's called blue crawl.
Yeah, I was going to ask you as far as the food source in there. You said bluegills. Was there any? Are there any tilapia in there? I mean, just looks like a big bluegill anyway. But was it mostly just bluegills that you were seeing in there?
Yeah, a lot of bluegill for whatever reason. That creek, I never saw them big populations of tilapia in there. You know that make them big,
Yeah,
giant, look
beds.
like
Yeah.
UFO beds.
Yeah.
I never saw a single one of them in that creek all week. But then some of the other creeks I'd go to, some of the shallower, flatter creeks, I'd see a lot of tilapia, but I never did see any tilapia in there at all.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. That one that you had on the branch, I saw that whole thing happen as I was watching it, and I'm like, "Oh man, if he's going after this thing, it's got to be a decent, it's got to be a decent fish." And right there, you realize how important braided line can be. Whenever
Oh,
you're in,
absolutely.
it just sawed the stuff, just sawed the stuff in half. And when you actually pulled up on that, I'm like, man, he's being really, really patient with this fish. This one is going to be, and there was every fish basically you caught. You could have went back and said that was the most important fish, or that was every fish was important as the other one, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I lose that fish or break that fish
Yeah.
off, I don't win the tournament.
Now, when that last day, like you said, there was like two or three fish that either missed your bait or just came off. And do you think that had to do with either the pressure or just because the tide wasn't right yet, or a little bit of all of that?
Well, I think it was a combination of everything. What I think really happened is I think those fish that were in that creek actually got up there to where they wanted to start spawning.
Hmm.
Because I'd had a ton of fish follow my bait or wake it or push it, which tells me that they're getting ready to lock down, and all they're trying to do at that point is get that brim or that bluegill out of the way. So I had a lot of that going on. I lost on that last day. I lost two little keepers. I mean, they were just 13 or 14-inch fish, which would
Hmm.
have been huge to
Yeah.
have one of those. And then right there, with about 30 minutes to go, I lost one of those 4 or 5 pound class fish, and still
Uh,
this day I have no reason, no idea why she came off. I mean, look, let's face it, you got the best jigs, the best line, the best rods. It doesn't matter. Sometimes they just come off. You
yeah.
know, I mean, that's a bass that I've caught 1,000 times, and for whatever reason, this time she comes off. So after I lost that last fish, I'm not gonna lie, I was like somebody took all the wind out of my sail, and thought that I obviously give another one away.
Yeah, that was when I heard that. I'm like, man, this is going to be because when you got Jay Zakurat right behind you, and you couldn't see it where you were, but he was sticking on this area really, really tight and really, really hard, trying to catch this one fish. And I'm like, if anybody catches, I mean, and we knew it was within 6 ounces. And they were pretty close on Score Tracker. That was pretty cool. It was relatively everybody was pretty close like that. We're like, wow, one 12-inch fish either way could make a huge difference on that. And obviously, it got tough for just about everybody the last day. Things were changing, right?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I think a lot of that had to do with the weather was starting to stable out and it was starting to get warm. And I think a lot of them fish were either starting to get locked on or getting ready to set up to spawn, which I think, and then obviously we beat on them for 4 days. So that never.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't help anything. Sometimes on that fourth day, it's going to get a little bit tougher for sure. Um, hey, we're gonna take a break, about 2.5 minutes. We come back. I want to go through. Tell some more people who don't know. I mean, a lot of people obviously do, but talk a little bit more about your swim jig and about your flipping jig and some of the stuff that you've helped design. I want to get into some of the trailers because I know you were using some Zoom trailers that you really like on there, and just give everybody kind of like the lowdown of your complete setup and have some fun with that when we get back. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll be back in about 2 with Bill Lowen. Located in Springfield, Illinois' largest selection of sports and sportswear, hunting, fishing, specialty shops and services, a 65-foot Ferris wheel, 16,000-gallon saltwater aquarium, and industry-leading knowledgeable employees. You don't take chances at Shields, ever. At Lure Parts Online, we have everything you need to make your own lures, tie your own flies, pour soft plastics, and more. Easy ordering ensures you get your products quickly. You can build all you need to create your own angling success at Lure Parts Online. Cast King, fueled by innovation through novel concepts and ingenious designs, markets directly to consumers with unprecedented cost-effective e-commerce practices, cutting costs by 30% more on average. Cast King empowers anglers of all skill levels to achieve things never thought possible. Find out more at castking.com. Mudhole is your number one source for custom fishing rods. Mudhole is the world's largest supplier of rod building supplies, information, education, and instruction. The best components and brands you trust, including MHX, CRB, American Tackle, Pro Products, Fuji, AFCO, and more. It's easy to build your own fishing rods at mudhole.com. With 25% of net profits donated to faith-based and clean water initiatives, Wire to Fish Coffee was founded by folks who love Jesus, a good day of fishing, and great coffee. With every bag of Wire to Fish coffee, you support clean water, the sport of fishing, and helping others with a better quality of life. Find out more at wiretofishcoffee.com. Believing quality is measured by lifespan, harnessing their unique chemistry, engineering, and know-how, Dakota Lithium lasts 4 times longer, powering your passions and backing it up with an 11-year warranty. Find out more at dakotalithium.com. Hi, this is Jim Crowley. Make sure to catch my other show, Jim Crowley Outdoors, where we travel across North America pursuing anything that swims. We always detail our equipment and techniques and more, all in the pursuit of helping you to become a better angler. Jim Crowley Outdoors can be seen on Wire to Fish TV Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sling, Flex, Sports Tribal, Distro TV, Local Now, and more streaming stations. And we are back with Elite Series 2-time winner now, Bill Lowen. And great that, Bill, thanks again for coming back on the show, man. So glad to have you back and taking your time after the crazy week that you've had. So thanks for being back with us, man.
Thanks for having me.
You betcha. Hey, let's talk a little bit. We got some more comments coming in here. Hey, we know this guy. Andrew Taylor said, how did you decide what weight a jig to throw?
Well, I mean, that's always like the $1 million question on where do we start? You know what I mean? And what I figured out, just not only for that event, but in my years of being out here on the tour, is that typically when that water's cold, I want to be able to fish that jig as slow as I possibly can. And then, as the water gets warmer, into the summer, you obviously want to start speeding that jig up. And that's why, in my signature series line of swim jigs, I got a quarter, 5/16, and a 3/8, and I believe we're working on a half as we speak. Um, but I'm a big fan of that quarter ounce and a 5/16 ounce, especially when the water is cold, because it gives me the ability to almost what I call float that jig around the cover. Gives me the ability to fish it really slow, and obviously depending on what type trailer you put on that jig. I tip that jig with a Zoom Super Speed Crawl that has really big legs on it, and give me the ability to fish that jig really slow. Now on my flipping jig, that I have from Lure Parts Online, I believe that jig is available in an eighth, a quarter, a 3/8, a half, and a 5/8. Okay, and I went with a 3/8, for the St. John's event because I wanted to get um, a kind of a slower fall. I mean, that 3/8 falls a lot slower than a half would. And the area that I was using that 3/8 in, the water was a little bit deeper, but I wanted that slower fall because them fish didn't want that jig on the bottom. I had to kind of fish that jig up high and keep it up high in the water column, and the 3/8 fit the bill for that. So I guess generally, as a rule of thumb, when you're trying to select jig sizes, typically for me, on that swim jig, the colder the water, the slower I want to be able to fish it. and like I said, the warmer, the faster you want to be fishing. And then the same with the flipping jig. As that water's cold, I want to be able to fish it slow, keep it there for a long time. And then obviously, as the water gets warmer, we'll start going up to halves and 5/8 and things like that.
And also probably tell people too, it's that you can adjust the size of the trailer to make the jig do exactly what you want. I love how you phrase it when you're floating that jig. Is that quarter, and especially with that zoom speed crawl in the back, it's wide enough profile and those claws back there that it makes it easy for you to reel that jig slow, doesn't it? So you can, like you said, you can float it. Now, if you want that, if you're reeling that jig faster and you want to go a little bit deeper, do you ever switch the size of your trailer, or do you just go with a heavier swim jig?
Yeah, you could simply by switching the trailer instead of using the super speed crawl, you
Mhm.
could just go down to a regular speed crawl. It's going to have less water resistant, give you the ability to fish it down a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and the same thing with the jig too. Now, I saw you were using kind of more like a chunk on the back. Do you use more of the chunk style in the cooler water like that because it's got a little bit more subtle action? And then what trailer do you go to like as the year continues and the water warms up?
Typically for me, I'll have that super chunk tied on um, all year long. The only time that I made uh, the only thing that I will actually change, I actually was threading that chunk on for
Mhm.
this event. And what that by threading that chunk on gives that jig a faster fall because it puts more of the trailer inside the skirt. If I really wanted to slow that jig down, instead of threading it on the hook, I would have just pinned it right through the top of the chunk, almost like you would traditional pork. And that will slow that jig down because it makes it a bigger profile, bigger and bulkier. Gets more of the plastic out from under the skirt, so slows it down. But typically for me, I really like that super chunk style trailer all year long.
Yeah, now here's a question that I get asked, and I'd really like to know your opinion on this. When do you switch between a swim jig and a spinner bait, or a swim jig and a bladed jig? And I don't even know if you throw bladed jig that much, but when you say, today's just going to be much better conditions for a swim jig than it would be for a spinner bait?
First off, for me, it's always typically water clarity. Look, let's face it, a swim jig is very natural, it's very subtle, doesn't have a lot of vibration, doesn't have hardly any flash. So to me, a swim jig excels when that water's clean. I can't never remember a time where I really did really, really well on a swim jig when the water was really dirty.
Okay.
I think, like I said, just because of the lack of vibration, the lack of flash, and things like that. That's where I'll start to reach for a spinnerbait or a bladed jig. Typically for me, it's about water clarity and what I'm trying to achieve. And what I mean by that is if I'm fishing structure, let's say flooded bushes or grass or places where I feel like I'm trying to draw that fish out of. That's where I may go with a spinnerbait or a chatterbait because it has more drawing power than a swim jig does. So, like I said, it's all going to depend on cover and it's all going to depend on water clarity.
Now, one thing I'm gonna show here. It might be hard for some of y'all to see. I'm gonna show, but Bill and I actually both were talking to Lure Parts Online about this blade several years ago. It's just funny that we both kind of brought it up around the same time. It was called the K blade back in the day, and we started manufacturing at Lure Parts, and now it's called the T blade, and it's almost twice the thickness of a regular Colorado. And when you're fishing tough areas on the river, like we both were, that little single spin can really do some damage. It's just one of those baits. I always look at it as one of those baits that when you just need a bite. Do you feel the same way about it?
Absolutely. And I have referenced what I did last week with that swim jig. I couldn't tell you how many times too. It almost reminded me of bulging around a single Colorado blade
Yep.
spinner because that's basically what I was doing. I was fishing it really slow and bulging it around that cover. And that's the beauty of that T blade. That's kind of what it was designed for. It has a tremendous amount of lift, has a tremendous amount of vibration, and that spinnerbait, when you have it set up right, you can almost fish it in place and bulge it as slow as you possibly can. around that cover, which in turn excels really good when the water may be cool or when that water has some color to it. So if you haven't tried that T blade, you like to throw a single Colorado blade spinner bait, you're definitely missing out if you haven't tried it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I can't remember how long I've been throwing it. First time I ever seen that blade was from a lure company called Strictly Bass.
Yep, that's
Uh,
it.
and he made a short arm with that T blade, and it was unbelievable. And then, obviously, like every good thing in fishing, it disappears or they quit making it.
Yep.
And we said, you know what, we can't let this one die. So here we are. Yeah.
And I was so glad. His name was John Dool. John and I were friends. I knew John for years, uh, and when he's the one who introduced me to that K blade back then, which is now the T blade, which Lure Parts makes, and it was on a little teeny tiny frame, just like you said. And man, on the Ohio River, I won a federation tournament on Smithland Pool one year, thanks to that. When I mean, it was getting pounded, but when you needed a bite, that little thing and that little, I usually throw it, it's kind of hard to see here, but that's a coleslaw colored skirt on that stained water right there is just, and it still works for me at lacrosse and other places like that. Anyway, just a great bait. Now you've tinkered with your own baits for years. And that's how the jigs got to Lure Parts. What else do you enjoy building? Do you get into a little bit of everything, or is it mostly jigs?
I mean, pretty much, I consider myself a tinkerer, whether that be jigs, spinner baits, crankbaits, buzz baits, you name it. And I think, that's kind of how my partnership with Lure Parts Online started. You know what I mean? I was using stuff from back in the Stamina days when Lure Parts was called Stamina.
Hmm.
And I've been building, the backstroke swim jig. Basically, it's a new improved version of the old one from Stamina. But I mean, I've been building my own swim jig as long as I can remember. And so when they give me the opportunity to do a signature series line and a flipping jig, a swim jig, a finesse flipping jig, to forward facing sonar heads, finesse football heads. We have a lot of options with a lot of skirts. Natural colored skirts, flash skirts, everything basically that I use on
Yep.
tour. Um, every day. And the beautiful thing about Lure Parts is, and I always harp on this or talk about it, is that, like, for instance, let's say you buy three of my flipping heads.
Hmm.
They come three heads to a pack. Then you buy a pack of my signature series skirts. They come three to a pack as well. So basically, when it's all said and done, and I don't know the exact number, all I know is when you build it yourself and you build exactly what you want. What I mean by that is head color, skirt color.
Hmm.
'Cause look, let's face it. Sometimes you walk into the tackle store and try to buy something, and they never have what you want. So to have on hand to be able to build exactly what you want, and when it's all said and done, I think you got a little over like $3 in a jig or something.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, you can't even walk in a store and buy a high quality jig for less than $5, maybe even $6. So the cost saving to get uh, superior quality, I mean, it only makes sense. And look, who doesn't like to save money? Well, look, let's face it, forward facing sonar is the craze right now.
Yep.
It's probably not going to go away.
Hmm.
Uh, so you better learn it. And obviously, I spent a good amount of time in the fall last year, working on my forward facing sonar skills and things like that. And, you bring up the pinpoint head, and that's exactly what that was designed for. But it's just like any other bait. Just because we design it for that situation,
Yeah.
it can be used for so many other things.
Hmm.
So, with that being said, one of my favorite forward facing sonar heads is actually my jig that we designed to tie hair jigs on. Um,
Really? Oh yeah, yeah.
so, with that jig, it's got basically, I call it a cap head,
Hmm.
but all the weight is on the shank of the hook.
Yeah.
Uh, so it keeps that bait perfectly balanced in the water, keeps it perfectly level, just like a bait fish swimming through the water. And I actually believe we're working on a quarter ounce in that as well for forward facing sonar. because, like I said, that is starting to become one of my favorite heads for forward facing sonar.
And anybody who likes to fish smallmouth at all knows that you better have a hair jig in the boat. And when I don't care what time of year, I don't care when, you always got to have some hair in the boat. And that little jig right there, being able to tie your own hair on a jig can make a huge difference. And you said it, you alluded to it a little bit before. When you make your own stuff, you're the one who decides what you want. Nothing against store-bought stuff. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but with as much intelligent fishing pressure on the water that there is today, I think gives it. I don't think I know it gives me more confidence being able to build my own stuff, and I 100% believe it does for you because you've shown that, and it's got to feel really cool to not only build it but to win a big tournament on it, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There just comes a point where um, you want what you're using to be
Yeah,
as best as it can be. You know what I mean? That's like, and we use the my hair jig head for example. Wanted that designed because I got tired of not being able to get a hair jig that had a good hook in it or a good head design. So I just started tying my own, but I needed a head to put it on. Almost every signature series head I have at Lure Parts has a Gamakatsu hook in it. So we know that's a great quality hook. And all of you know that I am a stickler for details on
hmm,
hooks and head colors and hook angles and weed guards and things like that. So the beauty of that stuff in my signature series line is right out of the package, it's ready to fish.
right.
Uh, you
Yeah,
don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to trim
no,
weed guards. And I wanted it done like that because look, it can be intimidating to a guy that's getting a jig out and cutting on the weed guard and thinking, if I cut it too short, I'm going to get hung up. If I leave it too long, I might miss some fish. So I wanted everything where our customers could take it right out of the package and go fishing with it. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And especially if you're a tinkerer and you're like me and you want to build exactly what you want. I mean, heck, you may want a black head with a white skirt. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And you can't walk in the store and buy that.
yeah.
I don't carry very many of jigs in my box that's already built. I kind of carry heads and some skirts, and that way I can build whatever combination I want while I'm on the water, instead of building a bunch of jigs and maybe not using them and maybe they go to waste. I try to, like I said, build exactly what I need on the water. That way I can essentially, we always say match the hatch, but kind of match the conditions every time I'm out there.
And I tell people this a lot in seminars or just when I'm talking about making your own baits. I honestly believe that when you build your own baits, I, you're more in tune with what's going on because you built it. And I honestly believe that 10% of the anglers catch 90% of the fish because they understand what their lures do and what they're capable of. And when you build your own stuff, you are more in tune with what is going on because you have a horse in the race. Do you agree with that?
Well, here's what I'm going to say on that is I always say that when you got confidence on what you have tied on, you're going to catch them. If you got a bait tied on your rod that you have zero confidence in, there's pretty good chance you ain't going to catch anything.
Right.
Um, so I know when I build exactly what I want, and I know the components that are in, everything that we build, I have 110% confidence in it.
Yep.
I have the confidence that it's exactly what I need, and I have the confidence that typically when I get that bite, I'm going to put that fish in the boat. And obviously, it's very important that I put that fish in.
Yeah, and, food on the table is a good thing, and
Absolutely.
you got to have 100% confidence in that. Bill, what's next for you, buddy? I know Okeechobee, you're going to finish up there, and then are you working on designs of other stuff? Like I know you're with Arc Rods right now. Is that going? Everything going good there? Are you going to be
Yeah,
doing
everything's great with ARC. We're working on a swim jig rod right now. Um,
great?
yeah, so it's crazy times right now. We just
Going to be really busy. Well, I'll tell you what, before you go, why don't you tell everybody where they can find out more on your socials? You always got some good videos, and I love how you and Jen always have the thing at the opening day of the tournament. And she's a hard worker too, man. She's always up there early with you. watching everybody launch off and everything like that, which is just great. So, where can people find out more on your social media?
Yeah, I said, oh, it takes a team to make this happen, and we got a really good one. Not only with them, but with my partners as well.
Yep.
But yeah, if you just want to follow along on all this, BillLowen.com. It's probably the simplest way. Like you said, we do a lot of tips. We do a lot of lives in the morning at launch. If you want to know what's going on in our world, yeah, just follow along.
And I'll tell you what, Bill is one of the easiest guys to get a hold of and does a great job of getting back to people. Man, I am so happy for you to win that second one. Like I remember when we interviewed you after the first one, I screamed when you caught that big one, jumped right off the couch, man.
Well,
And I,
it's hard enough to get one, let alone two, and I never take it for granted. That's for sure.
no, so I appreciate your time tonight, especially as busy as you went. God bless you and your family. Continued success this year and keep catching them, brother. Love watching you do it.
Thank you, bud. Appreciate you.
Okay, we'll see you.
All right, thanks.
Bill Lowen. Glad to have him on there tonight. That was great. Glad he took time out, especially after his busy craziness like that. Make sure you check out the trailers on there that we have from Bass Academy. Okay, there's some awesome new trailers. The Turbo Tail out there, also the Crunch Craw. All these, the Turbo Tail is the best swim jig trailer I've ever used, and we make it in 3 sizes. So look at that one. Also look at the Crunch Craw, which is going to be in the back of it. We also have a swimming craw. All that stuff is going to be great for jig fishing, and you'll see them on the show again this year. But if you go to Lure Parts Online, okay, go check out the Bill Lowen stuff. Go check out the new Bass Academy stuff that I helped design, and look at the Bill Lowen stuff, obviously, that he helped design. A lot of great stuff coming from Lure Parts right now. And if you order tonight, make sure, or whenever, use that code JC Outdoors 10. You'll get 10% off. Also, follow us on TikTok and YouTube because there are different discount codes there. Listen, we want you guys, we want to build with you. Okay. Building baits is fun. Bill told you all about it. It does. It will give you more confidence in your stuff, and you are the one who decides what you want. Check us out at Lure Parts Online on all our social medias right there because we want to build with you. So look forward to that right there. Now, our friends over at Cast King, like I said, a ton of great stuff coming from Cast King. Put in that code JC52AFF. You get 20% off of everything at Cast King. Doesn't matter what it is. Use that code as much as you want. Give it to people. Give it to high school anglers, whatever. But make sure you give it to people because right now Cast King always has a bunch of great stuff, and more stuff is coming out as well. Our friends over at Wired to Fish Coffee, right at the end of the show. Last to the caffeine. All right. They give up to 20% of their profits back to clean water, faith based initiatives, and the sport of fishing. Awesome taste in coffee. My friends, give it a try. You are going to love Wired to Fish coffee. They're medium and dark roast. Ooh, that's just some really good stuff. You will absolutely love it. Now, our friends over at Mudhole, right now, if you at your first order, I think you get 10% off. Yeah, first order is 10% off, and anything over $99, you get free shipping. Okay. So remember that. Also, our friends over at Dakota Lithium, there is a really cool code for you, Slickfish10, right there. Put that in, you get 10% off. Great having our guest, Bill Lowen. Great for all of you joining me here tonight. I want to thank our friends at Lure Parts Online, Cast King, Wired to Fish Coffee, Mudhole, Dakota Lithium, and Shields, and of course, our awesome audience. We just wouldn't have a show if it wasn't for all of you. God bless you. Until next time, I'm Jim Crowley. See you soon.